Hi, you're listening to It Happened to Me, a rare disease and medical challenges podcast. The mission of our podcast is to support you, our listeners, and to create community as you confront the toughest challenges in life. All of us will experience health hardships. The real question is how we adapt. That's the focus of It Happened to Me, which wants to help you overcome limitations and live a full and satisfying life. Drawing on their own health challenges, co-hosts Kathy Gildenhorn and Beth Glassman interview guests who share stories and research to help you succeed in the face of difficult health obstacles. It happened to me. I'm not alone, and neither are you.
Today's episode is a story of heartbreak, urgency, and advocacy in the face of an invisible rare disease. We have two guests joining us today to learn about OTC deficiency: Jordan Kruse, whose son had the condition, and Dr. Susan Berry, who was his geneticist. Dr. Susan Berry, a geneticist at M Health Fairview and a professor at the University of Minnesota Medical School, she specializes in rare metabolic conditions like OTC deficiency, which is a rare genetic urea cycle disorder, or UCD, that can cause toxic ammonia buildup in the blood.
Our other guest is Jordan Kruse, a mother from South Dakota who is bravely sharing her story about her son, Pruitt. Pruitt was born with OTC deficiency, a rare urea cycle disorder that causes ammonia to dangerously build up in the blood. Despite his strength and the family's love and care, Pruitt passed away at just 6 months into his life. In his memory, Jordan has founded the Brave Little Ones Foundation, aiming to support families facing medical hardship and raise awareness about the genetic condition like OTC. This episode honors Pruitt's life, gives voice to the rare disease community, and shares important insights that could save lives in the future.
Jordan and Dr. Berry, thank you for joining us on It Happened to Me today. Let's start at the beginning. Jordan, can you tell us about Pruitt? Maybe a favorite memory with him or a favorite moment.
Yeah, so first off, thanks for having us. So Pruitt is our youngest of 3 children. He has 2 older brothers, Paxton, who is 7, and then Pryor, who's 3. And he was truly the best baby. And I'm probably a little biased because I'm his mother. But yeah, he was loved and adored by everyone around us. And he was surrounded by so many people. Our whole community came together in a really special way, and he really is like the definition of brave. He was the best snuggler. He always had this really tight grip on my hand or the collar of my shirt. But he was just the cutest and sweetest baby, but he could give a really good side eye, especially if the nurses or his therapists were, forcing him to do things he didn't really want to do. But yeah, his time was short with us, but the 6 months that we got with him were really honestly incredible, with the help of his medical team, of course. And so even though we had not a very long period of time with him, we were able to experience a lot of moments of joy. But I'd say one of my favorite moments was being able to actually take family photos. We had rescheduled 3 times to get photos done because every time we had them scheduled, he ended up having to be admitted into the hospital. So finally we could get those photos done in our comfort of our home was really special.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. It just brought a smile to my face. And I love the names of all 3 of your boys.
I was going to say, beautiful name.
Now, some, but not all states include OTC deficiency on newborn screening. Now, is this how you found out about Pruitt and OTC?
No, so actually in South Dakota, we learned that OTC isn't included on the newborn screening panel. So he was born on May 17th of last year, and he was seemingly healthy. We were discharged on the 19th, early afternoon or so. And at that point, his newborn screen had come back clear. He was nursing fine. He was, he was my third child. So everything seemed to be honestly going perfectly normal.
Yeah.
Our biggest worry was honestly getting him home to the chaos of becoming like having three children.
Three kids,
yeah. So, everything was completely normal. We went home and, we actually had a really great first night home with him to start off. Like I said, I was really worried because I didn't know how my middle child would react to him because he's kind of a little stinker at times. So I wasn't sure if he'd warm up to him, but no, the boys clicked. We had family over. We did a movie night in. And so everything was just perfect until it wasn't, honestly. So it kind of just turned quickly. He started to begin to refuse nursing and then started making uncomfortable grunting noises. And that's when we were like, okay, this isn't normal. So we did bring him to our local ER, which is about 30 minutes away. And at that point, he was admitted to the ED and they ran essentially a sepsis workup on him. They assumed that he had something bacterial or viral. And so we were admitted to the peds floor first. And when we got to the peds floor, they wanted to run a CT scan on him. So then they brought him down to CT. Well, my husband was with him at that time because I was trying to figure out, I needed a pump at that point. And he had ended up coding at that point. So then he was admitted to the PICU. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So that was all early morning of the 20th of May. And then genetics got consulted on the 22nd. And so an ammonia was drawn on the 22nd and it was extremely elevated, over 1200. And then I know every lab area is different as far as what the normal range is, but in our Sioux Falls hospital, under 72 is what they considered normal for him. So it was extremely high. And so that's when they kind of started feeling okay, it's got to be something
Something going
on or something.
Yeah.
So then my husband and I were both tested and we got verbal confirmation, I want to say 5 days later. Don't quote me on that one. And it came back that I was the carrier, which was a shock to us because I've been completely healthy my entire life. I've never shown any symptoms myself. And of course, I've got two other completely healthy children. So yeah, so no, it was not found on the newborn screen.
Well, now, has that changed at all? Are you working to get OTC included in South Dakota?
I'd love for it too, but I don't really know exactly what the hoops are for that. I'm hoping his story and stuff can push for that expanded newborn screening. But yeah, it hasn't changed yet.
Dr. Berry, let's delve into, I'm sure that most people in our listening audience have never heard of OTC. I have to say for myself, I had to do some research. I had never heard of it. And I'm wondering, when you explain this to us, what this is, and how do you explain it to a parent like Jordan?
It is a complicated situation. I'm going to preface this by saying that one of the problems is that this is not a condition that's easy to do newborn screening for. So it hasn't been particularly amenable to newborn screening as a strategy. It makes it very challenging. And that means we have to have other ways of finding it early and raise awareness. So I'll touch on that at some point. But what is OTC deficiency? OTC stands for ornithine transcarbamylase deficiency.
That's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful, and that's why people call it OTC deficiency. What it is that our bodies need to recycle and reprocess protein. We're always building, but we're always recycling because that's how you grow and gain weight and just have normal body function. And the tricky piece is that means you have to find a way to get rid of some of the parts of the protein for that recycling process. And one of those is that you have to get rid of the parts of amino acids in protein, that's what makes up protein, that contain nitrogen. a chemical that your body uses and needs to be able to both have and recycle. And to do that, we have a special biochemical reaction in our livers primarily that help us turn that protein over, get rid of the excess leftover proteins, nitrogen, and allow us to move along and make new protein and use new protein effectively. And so if that recycling process doesn't work, the technical term for that particular recycling chemical reactions is urea cycle, It takes the amino acid and essentially breaks the nitrogen off. It makes it into ammonia, which our body needs to get rid of. To get rid of that ammonia, it goes through a series of biochemical processes that are helped by an enzyme, by several enzymes, one of which is OTC. And so if that ammonia doesn't get turned into a new chemical called urea that your body can get rid of, it accumulates in the body as a poison. Dangerous levels of the ammonia will result in brain swelling and severe brain damage if it's not essentially discovered relatively rapidly and other means are found to get rid of the ammonia because the body can no longer do it itself.
It's saturated. It just seems to be oversaturated, is what you're saying.
It doesn't have the capability to change ammonia into urea because of the biochemical processes going awry because of the genetic deficit of that particular enzyme.
Wow.
There are other similar disorders of other enzymes in the urea cycle, but OTC is the most common of these. They're all genetic conditions. Some are diagnosable by newborn screening.
Is it painful? Would you know? Are there symptoms so you would know if there was ammonia?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it's not painful. What it does, though, is it changes the level of consciousness of the baby. And so things that Jordan described where babies stopped wanting to eat, and then gradually what happens is the swelling of the brain will cause, it may cause seizures. But what it mostly does is cause a very serious coma, and if left untreated, can result in cardiac arrest or death. It's a very dangerous situation. And the tricky thing is that unless you ask in a situation where a baby has what looks like a serious infection, unless you ask the question in your mind, say, could this be ammonia? Could it be? And you check it, it's very difficult to diagnose without asking that question. And so I think one of the things that I know Jordan is interested in, I am as a professional, is having doctors that take care of babies in this kind of situation, when they see a baby that looks like they have a bad infection, sepsis, which is what they thought was going on for Pruitt. If they don't ask that question and say, could it be ammonia? Should I check ammonia? Then they don't.
You know, Jordan, all I can say is from your story, you did what a parent should do.
Absolutely.
Something wasn't 100%. Right. And your instinct as a mother told you something isn't right. And you were that baby's advocate. And I applaud you. And I want all parents to think about this. Our children need us. Don't be afraid to question. Take care of your children, and going to an emergency room sounds like it was the best course of action you could have taken, Jordan.
Yeah, if we would have waited any longer, he would have coded in our car on the car right up.
Oh, my goodness. My goodness. You did everything you could, Jordan.
Yeah, absolutely did. My interest in this in some ways is to increase awareness, as is Jordan's, because the more that my colleagues at all levels who take care of babies in an emergency think of the possibility that they could have a metabolic condition and not necessarily assume it's been diagnosed by newborn screening. I love newborn screening. It's a gift to the lives of babies. But it doesn't detect everything, and this is one that it doesn't detect well.
And you can't always rely on it because the lab's being open and stuff either.
Wow.
That it's very difficult to bring that ammonia back under control. When you start out with a better state of existence, it is very hard to keep the body ammonia.
It was too late. It was just too late.
It's too far,
so for the doctors in our audience, it sounds like please listen to Dr. Berry and the importance of awareness and how important it is to consider an ammonia test earlier in the process.
Yeah, because here we were at least 2 days into his severe clinical course before an ammonia was drawn.
He was on and off dialysis for a good chunk of time before, and it took a really long time to figure out, a mixture of cocktails essentially.
And we had a lot of conversations about the
Yes.
strategy because
Yeah.
I'm in Minneapolis, and this was taking place closer to home with some very fine metabolic specialists as well. But we had a lot of conversations about strategies and opportunities to try to control that ammonia. It was a very difficult task.
2 days doesn't seem like a long time.
No.
And yet it would have made all the difference.
Yes, it unfortunately would have made quite a bit of difference if it had been diagnosed.
Oh, unbelievable. Jordan, what was it like to advocate for your son's care in a system that wasn't always equipped to support you?
That's tricky because there's times where it was extremely exhausting, but other times, it was also very rewarding in a way, like having Pruitt, and yes, with all of his medical complexity, it did give me some purpose,
Right.
It wasn't just being his mom, but also his caregiver. And so my husband and I had to become experts in things that we never imagined having to even understand. Like we had never even heard of OTC deficiency, let alone a urea cycle disorder. So just, having to learn the medical lingo was challenging, especially at the very, very beginning when it was all very brand new to us. And, no parent wants to, nobody wants to be in that position. But being in that position had also made me grow in ways that I never expected. Becoming that medical parent was overwhelming. It was scary because sometimes you would go in and you wouldn't necessarily be speaking with people who understood the disease, specifically like when we went into the ER. So our genetics team wasn't necessarily right at hand at the moment. Just administering an ammonia lab, I'd have to remind people to have ice on hand, simple things that other people, you would assume that your medical personnel would know
what
but
to do.
isn't always the case. And I'm not saying our medical team didn't do an amazing job. They really did. But when it's a rare disease, they don't always know everything themselves. Now, our genetics team was phenomenal. But anytime that we were on the peds floor and the ER, it was a lot of times I had to make sure that I was double checking work that was being done, checking that it was the right meds at the right times, and just administering all the correct things. And it's more than just the hospital stays, it's the doctor's appointments and just managing regular daily life and things like that around the clock.
And you had 2 other children.
Yeah. So it was exhausting and challenging, but at the same time, we had no other option. It's what you do. Yes. It was very eye-opening to learn how much communication is very important. So important. I did go back to work for a little bit when I could. And even when I was at work, whenever I had time off, I was calling the pharmacy or specialty equip and just contacting his dietitian, his geneticist. It was a lot of communication. So yeah, there were moments of deep, helplessness, it felt like at times, and frustration.
Well, hats off to you to be a mom of 2 other boys at the same time as a wife and working and a medical student.
Yeah. Well, we were blessed to have a family around. So it wasn't just me. We weren't alone. And our genetics team, I felt was always good about listening to me, even if they probably thought I was crazy at times and overbearing. But yeah, we didn't do it alone. So, and imagine families who I know not everyone
don't have that.
Support. So we were blessed in that realm of having the connections to our family and friends and community that really helped us get through it as well. So
beautiful. But Jordan, tell us about the Brave Little One Foundation. What inspired it and what are its goals?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was obviously inspired entirely by the journey of Pruitt.
Right. Yeah.
So obviously we lived through medical uncertainty. And during that time, we were just incredibly overwhelmed by how our community rallied around us in some of our, hardest and most difficult moments of our life. And so this foundation honestly sparked fairly quickly. I'm a go-getter. I don't like
I
to
can
sit
tell.
around. And you go from being a medically complex parent and you're constantly go, go, go. And so after he passed away, it felt like we had all this time in the world, and I did not like that. And so this foundation was just kind of started in a way of giving back to the community that rallied behind us. And then, just being able to keep Pruitt's memory and name alive. That's kind of where it all started. So our mission is essentially to help support families that are local in our area who are facing medical hardship. My husband and I are both teachers, so education is important to us. So part of the foundation is that we provide 2 scholarships to 2 Lenox High School graduating seniors. And then we obviously, our goal is to raise awareness for OTC deficiency. So every Friday I post a fun fact. Others might not necessarily find it fun, but I do. And then on Wednesdays, I find other families who are in the OTC community, and they share their story essentially. Yeah. So it's kind of my way of giving families a platform to share their stories while also educating others on this rare condition. And if you knew Pruitt, he also had a G tube. He started with the NJ tube, but transitioned into a G tube, and we had to find ways to, clothes that worked for him. And G-tube friendly clothing is kind of overly priced. So I adapted his clothing at home. And so now that is also part of our foundation, where we modify clothing to make them feeding tube friendly.
That's phenomenal. That's really
never thought I'd be lower.
Quite a foundation.
Yeah.
Now, thank you. Dr. Berry, what role do organizations like the National Urea Cycle Disorders Foundation, or NUCDF, play in connecting families to the right care?
Well, so NUCDF is really a fundamental way that families can gain access. They try to make themselves very available and try to make sure that families have access to qualified centers who can provide the kind of treatment that's necessary for these really challenging little persons. And it's the other thing that NUCDF has been instrumental in is collaboration with the physician community of care providers for urea cycle disorders through the NIH-funded Rare Disease Consortia, where for the last 20 years, research funding has supported new knowledge and learning about urea cycle disorders through partnership of academic physicians who care for people with urea cycle disorders and NUCDF. So when they do the scientific guidance for that kind of work, NUCDF is at the head of the table with the physicians who lead those kind of research groups. So it's to advance new knowledge through research and care to make sure that family have access to the best possible expertise in care for their children, and to provide a community like Jordan describes for her own foundation, where she gathers information from other families who've experienced this. This is one of the things that NUCDF also makes every effort to do, is to help build that community of families and to support their ability to speak up and to advocate for their children.
That's wonderful. And following up on that, Jordan and Dr. Berry, what advice would you give to other families who are just beginning to navigate a rare disease diagnosis?
I guess I'll go first. I mean, at the very beginning, just simply take a deep breath. I don't feel like those first few weeks, I barely was breathing. I don't know if I've been surviving, but because it's overwhelming and, it's scary. But I feel like at first I was afraid to ask questions because I am not the person who wants to step on other people's toes and get in the way. So I would say not to be afraid to ask questions because it's not going to hurt anything. You're not stepping on people's toes. It's a way of advocating for your kid. And I think connecting with other families is very important. And sometimes it's very hard to find those families. I haven't met anybody in South Dakota who also has OTC or any urea cycle disorder. I'm not saying there isn't one. I just haven't found one myself. So I reached out to Facebook and found Facebook groups and connected with families that way. And I'll be honest, I learned a lot through that. Doctors and medical professionals are very brilliant and they know a lot, but they don't necessarily have to go home with the children and manage it in the comfort of their homes, whereas these families do. So having that connection was helpful and made me feel a little less crazy and alone at times. And if it hadn't been for those families, I don't know if we would have pursued liver transplant. And yeah, so I would just say, take a deep breath, ask those questions, and, get connected with other families and be very communicative with your medical team. Don't be afraid.
Dr. Berry, following up on that, it makes me think you're obviously so brilliant, but you're also compassionate from what I can hear. And sometimes we in the community don't feel that our medical professionals understand what it's like. And Jordan has just hit on something. We are the ones that go home with the child, not the doctor. What would you tell medical professionals how to help their patients really care for these children?
Well, one of the things to acknowledge the degree of difficulty of what we're asking people to do, and to speak that publicly with them and tell them we know that this is true. I can't enforce enough Jordan's comments about never hesitate to ask those questions and to push. And you said you didn't want to be the person in the emergency room who was getting in people's way or causing stuff. I actually tell families, but you're going to have to be that person. You're going to have to be that person. You're going to have to be the one who says, did you put that on ice? Did you really hang this at the right time? Have you completed that medication infusion in a timely fashion? There's no way around it. So I'm sitting there on the sideline saying, I know I'm not there, but you are. I also would say that one of the reasons something like NUCDF, the National Urea Cycle Disorders Foundation, was created was to give families that community, to have people find each other. Facebook has been really helpful in rare disease, in the rare disease space. The only caveat I would have for that is that you need to always filter the information you receive. When you get it from that kind of source, it doesn't mean it's not valid, but you need some way to
vet that information,
and to work with your doctors to help right size your comprehension of it.
And I agree with you because every disease and every individual is so different in how they respond to certain medical treatments and, our views on what quality of life look like and things like that. Like everything is, so
deeply personal.
Yes. So I do agree with you. Like, be wise and careful about what the information you're getting while also when you are
never hesitate to ask for it.
And
never hesitate to see whatever resources you can have. There's nothing wrong with asking. There's nothing wrong with getting more opinions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. I really hope people will do that.
Powerful message.
Dr. Berry, what is in the pipeline? What does future research look like?
This is an area, so things like the Rare Disease Consortia were created by NIH to foster a very specialized nature of rare disease care. And one of the things that's been a priority in those kinds of research endeavors is trying to improve care and potentially have more definitive interventions. So one of the things that's ongoing in this space, particularly for metabolic conditions, is the genesis of new interventions, such as RNA therapies to replace the protein that's missing using RNA strategies, not unlike what happened with the COVID vaccine, or gene therapies to substitute or change out the aberrant gene. Liver transplant is the standard treatment for baby boys with OTC at this point. If they get to a certain level of metabolic control and growth, Sometimes that is the therapy that is offered. Again, it's a very personal decision, and it depends on the circumstances, but that is, at this point, sort of the standard intervention for severe urea cycle disorders. Our hope is that some of these other ongoing clinical trials for things like gene therapies, for RNA therapies, may alleviate the necessity for such a major operation. But these are all in research. These things are moving forward. They have their own risks and benefits as well. But this is a very, very active, it sounds like a strange thing, and a very attractive target for rare disease therapeutics. So basically what CHOP were able to do is engineer some new technologies for genetic manipulation to essentially swap out the bad gene. And you need to have enough good gene working to do the job. That's why somebody who's a carrier like Jordan has half the amount of, I'm just roughly, this is not exact, but about half the amount of OTC function that is needed, but that's enough to cover her. It takes good care of her. If you can really increase the amount of OTC protein that's doing a job, instead of having it be a devastating disease, you can be maybe able to make it into a milder version of these things. And that's basically what they did for that baby. So they swapped out the gene in such a way so that he had enough of the protein in the urea cycle to make it work more effectively. So
isn't that remarkable?
The strategy that will be applied, I think highly likely it will be. It's a form of gene therapy.
What a positive way to end this discussion of the promise that we see. I have to say, Jordan, again, I want to thank you for sharing your story. You have been through the nightmare no parent wants to experience. Each of us feels your pain and your heartache that you will never overcome. But certainly by sharing your story, we have heard about Pruitt through your beautiful, beautiful conversation. And we know that there is hope, as Dr. Berry has just said, that with wonderful doctors like Dr. Berry, that there is some positivity in research in the future. And I hope that we can hopefully see an end to OTC one day and put it to bed where it belongs. So each of you, thank you for your time and for the conversation. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of It Happened to Me. We encourage you to learn more at ithappenedtomepod.com. Please use the contact form on our website to submit your guest suggestions, comments, questions, ideas, and feedback for the show. You can also email us directly at ithappenedtomepod@gmail.com. We would really appreciate it if you can leave us a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app like Apple or Spotify. This helps others in the rare disease and medical challenge community find us. It Happened to Me is created and hosted by Kathy Gillenhorn and Beth Glassman. I'm Keira Deneen from DNA Today, and I serve as our executive producer and marketing lead. Amanda Andrioli is our associate producer. Ashlyn Anokian is our graphic designer. And remember, it happened to me. I'm not alone, and neither are you.